Welcome back to another edition of Baseball for Maniacs. Definitely not the video I wanted to be doing for you guys today. For some of you guys that might know me from Phillies Fan 3 over the year, you will know how much of a supporter I am of Johan Rojas. Something about the way that kid played the game, especially on the defensive side of the ball, it was truly a sight to see. And you just saw the joy and the love of the game anytime he tracked down a fly ball, made a great throw. But let's get into the report because this dropped late last night. This is from Wilbur Sanchez on X, and he reported that Johan Rojas has tested positive for a performance enhancing substance. So, right when the news dropped, Johan Rojas was slated to be on the Dominican national team for the WBC. As a fourth outfielder, obviously wasn't going to play much. That outfield is stacked, but he was slated to be on the team. He plays winter ball there. He's very good in winter ball. He does have a pretty good reputation on the Dominican side of baseball. So it made pretty much sense why he would be on the team. But then when they announced the roster, why he wasn't on it suddenly, some eyebrows started to raise. So when the news came out yesterday, I saw this Phillies tailgate kind of responded to it, and he said, "Well, it most likely is a marijuana substance that he tested positive for, not a performance enhancing, because for some reason the WBC bans marijuana to where if you test positive, Javi Baez tested positive in 23, so he can't play in 26. That doesn't make any sense why he would get tested in 23 but can't play in 26. Wouldn't he have gotten suspended in 23? Whatever. But then the guy responded to Phillies tailgate, and he's like, no, 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 no. This is a performance enhancing drug. And I think we just have to wait until an official report comes out to make our jurisdiction. But if it's true, it sucks, man, because it's like he's one of my favorite players. Obviously, he struggled with the bat mightily, and we'll get into the rise, the fall, all of that in Johan Rojas's career. And it's just like, I don't know, maybe in his head he was thinking he was just trying to save his career one last time. Again, if it's true and he did take a performance enhancing, there is no justification. It sucks because he's one of my favorite players, but I got to call a spade a spade. When Jose Alvarado got suspended last year, I ripped him into pieces. Max Kepler, I don't really care because he's not on the team anymore. But we're really just gonna have to wait and see till the report comes out. But let's really get into the whole Johan Rojas saga because, like I said, he's one of my favorite players. I thought he was a for sure prospect that was gonna hit. I thought he was gonna be a superstar. Obviously, that's why I'm behind a mic doing a podcast, not in the president of baseball operations team or whatever, because obviously I was really wrong about this situation. But let's get into it. So Johan Rojas was signed as an international free agent on January 18th, 2018 for $10,000. Known for his elite defense, that was always his calling card. They thought the bat would eventually develop, but $10,000, like the Phillies were taking a flyer on that. Like Francisco Renteria signed for, I believe, $4 million. Like they think he's going to be a superstar. They never envisioned Johan Rojas being at that level, but they thought like, $10,000, let's see what we have in this kid. And he was called up in 2023 due to an injury. I believe it was Christian Pache. He was injured at the time. And he was a sixth-ranked prospect in the Phillies organization at the time. Funny story, I was actually at Johan Rojas's debut. It was the doubleheader. I was sitting in right field. So I didn't know anything about the kid up until the notification came that he was getting called up. So I was like, okay, cool. What I heard about him was his defense is his calling card. Now, he got called directly up from Reading. He didn't even play in AAA, but the Phillies had a need. They were competing for a World Series. At the time, it was more like a 10-day stint. Like once Pache got back, Rojas would be sent down, but he outperformed that. And I was in right field. I think I was in row one or row two. I just remember when he made that catch, the electricity in that stadium. And then he throws the ball and gets Hassan Kim out at first. Drew Ellis, Phillies legend, was at first base, made the tag. And it felt like a moment, dude. It just felt like, oh, this kid's got some game. Now, granted, it was just one game, but it was the midst of the summer. The Phillies were playing great baseball. We were trying to get back to the World Series, finish the job, and that kid just brought that life. And then you see Nick Castellanos dapping him up. It was like, okay, let's go. It's go time. Then he got his first hit later that night because, again, they played two. And then let's get into his 2023 regular season because it was fantastic. I kid you not, what he was doing on the defensive side of the baseball, and he had 14 defensive run saves in 59 games. That's genuinely insane. I said, and it wasn't hyperbole at the time, he was the best defensive center fielder I've ever seen with my own eyes. Like the way he just gets the reads on balls to where he makes a hard catch look routine just because he's able to see the ball and get to the spot. But he was making diving catches. He was catching balls up against the wall. He had a cannon of an arm. And I was like, man, we finally got that defensive center fielder that we've been dying for the last few years in Philadelphia. Because Brandon Marsh was the center fielder in 22 when he got traded here. And he was pretty good in 22, but in 23, you kind of saw, okay, he's a good center fielder. Now, eventually, he kind of regressed and he was more of a left fielder. That's why he plays left field now. But he was fine. But when Johan Rojas came up, you're like, oh my goodness, this is another level of defense I have never seen. But he also had the bat. He batted .302 with a 771 OPS for a 110 OPS plus, to where everyone and their mothers thought this was the center fielder. Because you got to realize, especially now in Major League Baseball, center field is one of the weakest spots for the bat production, to where more teams are focusing on defense because there's just not a lot of talent there with the bat. But Johan Rojas had both, and he was 23 years old. And it was like, holy crap, we had this guy for league minimum for at least 3 years, to where we thought he was going to take that step. And we kind of saw, in the postseason, a tale of what was to come with the bat. He batted .093 with a 276 OPS plus. And even after the postseason, you could kind of say, well, he was a rookie. He's facing the best pitching. Give him some slack. And that was kind of my mindset. But it was very alarming how mismatched he was, how overmatched he was at the plate, even against the best pitching. And I go to Game 7 of the National League Championship Series, that fourth inning, where Casty got out, so there was 2 outs, runners on second and first. Brandon Marsh was batting eighth. Johan Rojas was batting ninth. The Diamondbacks essentially walked Marsh on 4 pitches. Now, they didn't intentionally walk him, but it was essentially an intentional walk because they knew Johan Rojas was coming up. And we were up 2-1 at that time, to where a single, a double, anything would have just changed the whole trajectory of that game. But the Diamondbacks knew what they wanted to do. And in that moment, Rob Thompson should have went to either Jake Cave or Christian Pache, because he eventually pinch hit Johan Rojas. His next at bat, Pache got a walk. But I would have put Jake Cave up there, lefty on righty, see if he can get a hit, and then obviously flop Jake Cave for Christian Pache the next inning, to where that's one of Rob Thompson's bigger failures as a manager. But it still was like, damn, like Johan Rojas, like he batted .302 in the regular season, but what is going on? Now, in 2024, essentially, he had the center field job. We weren't going to judge him on a full playoff sample size, but it kind of did raise the question, should he start the year in AAA? Because up until that point, he had 0 at-bats in AAA because he was called directly up from Reading. So it was like, let's kind of see what he does in the spring. But it was Johan Rojas' job to lose. But he struggled mightily in spring training, to where, in my opinion, they should have sent him down, let him work on some things, because you had Whit Merrifield. Whit Merrifield did sign with the Philadelphia Phillies to be a utility man. He knew his role, but he even said in a podcast he thought his performance in spring training was deserving of him getting some everyday at-bats, to where it just made so much sense to send Johan Rojas down, let Merrifield play left field, let Marsh play center, and then if Johan Rojas develops and continues to hit at AAA, then you bring him up in May or June. And he struggled mightily up until June. It was just the signs of the playoffs were coming to fruition in the regular season, to where it's like, you're kind of screwed now, because if he's struggling a couple weeks, you have to kind of give him some run to see if he can get out of it. He eventually never did in 2024. So he got sent down on June 17th, but there was another injury to where he got called up June 28th. So, and he hit the ball well in AAA in that 10, 11 games or whatever it was. But they needed him up at the big league club, and then he struggled again. Like he's one of those players with the bat that they call like a 4 AAA player, to where it's like really, really good at AAA, but not good at the major league level, somewhere in the middle. And then eventually, when the Phillies traded for Austin Hayes was seen as an everyday player. So he would play left field and Marsh would play center. Rojas was limited to a 4th outfield option. With his defensive presence, like that's not a bad thing to have on your roster. But then Austin Hayes started to struggle. He had the kidney infection, and Johan Rojas actually started to play well in August and September, to where by playoff time, he was essentially the everyday center fielder. Now, going into 2025, we scroll down here real quick. There was no role for him because the Phillies wanted to see if Brandon Marsh could play every day against lefties. And I don't really fault them for doing that because Brandon Marsh has always been able to hit right-handed pitching, but his numbers against lefties in 22, 23, 24 were not good. But the problem was he never really got a full chance to play every single day. So the Phillies were going to give him that chance. And then Max Kepler was signed to a one-year deal, so he was going to play every day in left. And then obviously Castellanos was still there in right, and he just didn't have a spot. So he was still on the major league roster. He was the fourth outfielder. But if Marsh was playing every day against righties and lefties, Johan Rojas was limited to a late inning defensive replacement. Now, Brandon Marsh did struggle mightily. It was true that he could not hit lefties. He couldn't even hit righties at the time, to where he got sent down. They said it was an injury, but I think it was more of a mental break for him, to where they used the injury as an excuse. He went down to AAA. It wasn't just a rehab assignment. He was there for about a week. They say he re-aggravated his hamstring. I think that was BS, but I think that was good for Brandon Marsh in the sense of like he needed that mental break, and then he was phenomenal the rest of the year after he came back from Lehigh Valley. But when Brandon Marsh was down for that month, Johan Rojas essentially was the everyday center fielder, and he had a 304 average with a 732 OPS at the end of April, to where it was like, man, is Johan Rojas finally figuring it out with the bat to where he could be at least serviceable, because the glove was always still there. And if a 304 average with the 730 OPS with his defense, that is a 4 to 5 win player, no doubt about it. But then it comes to the point Marsh was always going to get another chance. You couldn't just let Marsh rot in AAA, to where I think signing Max Kepler essentially ruined any chance of Johan Rojas getting everyday run for an extended period of time. And the Max Kepler signing just didn't really make a lot of sense, to where I would have started the year Rojas in center, Marsh in left. And I get it. After 2024, the fans were clamoring for an upgrade in the outfield because it was pretty bad. But if you're not going to replace him with a star level player, and the Phillies weren't in the market for that in the 24 offseason, why would you sign Max Kepler? Because then you're essentially limiting Johan Rojas' potential after one bad year. Now, granted, the signs of his bat were pretty prevalent to where you kind of knew what you had, but I would have given him one last chance, because here's the thing. If Johan Rojas would have had the production he had in April when Marsh went down, but was given the chance to continue to play, because when Marsh came back, it was like, it wasn't a platoon role. Like Thompson was like, they're going to split time, which is never good. You don't want to split time with two players because neither one of them can get a chance to get in their groove and be the player they need to be. So I just wish Kepler wasn't signed, to where if you could have unlocked Johan Rojas for this team, that changes everything with this era of Phillies baseball. And then if you struggled again, you make a deal at the trade deadline. Harrison Bader would still have come to the Phillies if Johan Rojas was struggling, to where the whole Max Kepler signing kind of put a wrench in Johan Rojas' Phillies career. He eventually got sent down when they made that move for Harrison Bader. And then that was the last game he ever played with the Philadelphia Phillies. We don't know if it's going to be his last. We have to see what happens with the suspension, everything, this, that, and the third. And he was actually going to be on the playoff roster as a late inning defensive replacement or a pinch runner, but he hurt his quad, to where that made it impossible. But Dombrowski said at the end of your press conference that no, he was going to be on that roster, and he would have been the pinch runner for Castellanos in that situation in game 2, the infamous bunt. And that really just is the story of Johan Rojas with Philadelphia. It sucks because, like I said, he's one of my favorite players. I love the energy that kid played with, the passion, the love he has for the game of baseball. But at some point, if you're not productive with the bat at the major league level to that extent, like if he was a below average hitter with that defense, that's still a valuable player in Major League Baseball. But the bat was so bad to where you could not have an automatic out on a championship team, because he was essentially an automatic out in the 2023 playoffs. And we saw what kind of damage that did in Game 7 of the National League Championship Series. So we're just going to have to wait and see about the Johan Rojas suspension thing. If it's marijuana, if it's performance enhancing, if it's PED, it's like he never really had a role on this team anyway, and it just kind of pushes him to the back burner because he wasn't going to make the Major League roster this year or out of spring training. I think he was going to start in AAA, to where I just don't think Johan Rojas is a major league player, and that sucks to say. I wish him nothing but the best. We're gonna have to see. But that's essentially the rise and fall of Johan Rojas, in my opinion. Let me know what you guys think. Do you like Rojas? Do you hate Rojas? Do you think the suspension is true? Do you think it's marijuana? Do you think it's performance enhancing? Let me know what you guys think, but I kind of wanted to just do this video the day after the news broke, kind of give you guys up to date on what is happening, and when news actually does drop, if the report is accurate or not, I will be here to let you guys know. But as always, go Phils, and you guys have a good one.